Well, there's a new report out and it's recommending that the way we make students suspended or expelled from school a little bit fairer, and possibly even set up a tribunal allowing students to challenge decisions against them. We're joined now by Ben Mills from Youth Law, and in Rotorua studio, Patrick Walsh, the President of Secondary Principals Association of New Zealand. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Now, tell us what's at the heart of your report, Ben.
What's at the heart of our report is essentially the basic element of living in a democracy, which is if a government makes decisions about you, then you should be able to challenge them, and you can't realistically do that at the minute.
Patrick, let's bring you in here. Obviously, suspensions, expulsions, these have been around for many years. There is a system set up in place. Is the procedure set out by the Ministry of Education followed by schools at all times?
I think the vast majority of schools do comply with the law. There would be a minority that doesn't. Parents and students have a right to appeal to the Ombudsman and seek judicial review. Also, many schools now are experiencing lawyers coming along representing students at suspension hearings. Is
this a good thing or a bad thing that lawyers are involved?
Well, I think students are entitled to justice at hearings. My concern around that is that often there's arguments around procedural fairness when parents are not acknowledging the substantive issues, which might be a violence or a drug problem with their child, and that's the real issue that they need to deal with.
Ben, what do you say to that? Because is this another layer? I mean, if we set up an independent educational review tribunal, this is another layer of bureaucracy for parents to go through, for schools to deal with, when in their minds they've got the system in place and it's been working for years. In fact, suspensions and expulsions are going down in New Zealand at the moment.
Well, you might argue the system in Saudi Arabia where you have one person making decisions for everyone works well. The key thing is, I mean, we could look at it as another area of bureaucracy, or we could look at it as a crucial layer missing from what is currently allowing students and parents to access justice. We would agree with Patrick. Patrick's not saying things that are horribly controversial. You know, most schools do their best and most schools get it right. However, there's a significant minority that don't. That significantly disadvantages a lot of young people, and all we're saying is they should be able to challenge those decisions.
So what are you saying happens to these students who perhaps the system doesn't work for them, maybe they can't challenge, they don't have the resources to challenge or the nous to challenge a decision that they think is unfair? What are you saying happens to them?
Oh, there all sorts of things, or nothing is the real problem. So what could happen is that they are excluded from school. They can be very young at that time. If they're excluded, now there is a lawful reason why schools can exclude it, and again, most schools would follow that. But for the ones that don't, they can be out of school for a very long time. The ministry is very slack at getting them back into school. The ministry, interestingly enough, we've heard from a lot of sector organisations in the last couple of days over this. We haven't heard from the ministry. They've been very quiet on it. And what we're talking about here is not that, you know, let's be clear, we're not talking about if you do something wrong, you shouldn't be held accountable. We're talking about if you do something very minor wrong, should you be kicked out of school? Should the government be able to take away your education for a significant period of time? It could be months before they're back in.
Patrick, reading this report, it's saying these kids are out of school, this affects their future career prospects, their future earning potential. Is it the school's fault that these kids go on to fail?
Well, I think the issue is that the vast majority of schools do the right thing, and we accept that suspension and stand down should be used as a mechanism of last resort. And schools do, in fact, try to keep students in school. The key issue here is that there's 3,000 to 4,000 students nationally in New Zealand who have very severe problems, and they relate to violence, sexual deviancy and drug problems. Schools would try to keep those students in school, but when it comes to suspension, we don't have the resources to provide the drug counselling and the anger management. So often boards and principals do resort to suspension, because the message that we get from parents and the public is, although they have a concern for that individual student, they expect that the home they're sending their children from is going to be just as safe in the school environment. They don't expect their children to be offered drugs, to be beaten up and sexually assaulted. And if that happens, they want schools to deal with that seriously.
So, Patrick, are these students a little bit like hot potatoes? Nobody really wants to own them.
Yes, and we accept that they ought to be kept in school, because if they're not, they'll spiral down into a life of crime. Having said that, we do not have the resources to deal with them within the school.
Okay.
And we need them.
Is there do you think there's parental support, public support for an independent tribunal like this? Have you heard callings for this kind of thing?
No, I haven't, but I accept Ben's proposition that for the small minority schools who do get it wrong, it may be a more effective and efficient way of dealing with appeals and bringing those schools into line.
Ben, finally, for the people who say this is youth law, this is you guys, lawyers drumming up more business for yourselves, what do you say?
Well, for many lawyers, or for some lawyers, that is often said, and that could be true. For us, we're a small community law centre. We work nationally. Education is one of our issues. We have a combined total budget of $500,000.
So you're saying not guilty?
We do not earn money out of this, no.
OK, Patrick Welsh, Ben Mills, thank you both.
Thank you.